I'm old enough to remember when this happened back in the late 1980s into the early to mid 1990s when this was all going on the news. But the story began down in a place called Fife, Alabama. And it was there was a string of UFO sightings that people had been seeing in the sky over their small town. This is a small town, probably about 1,000 people or so back then. And it was a farming town. And there were all of these different UFO, UAP sightings around the city or around the town. And during that time, there was also a coinciding factor where there were animal mutilations that had begun happening to cows. It was happening to horses. And in some cases, I even heard it happen to like rabbits and stuff like that, like smaller animals. But the nature of the wounds on these animals was nobody could explain it. And they said that with the cows, for instance, they had been split open. It looked like they had been burned by something, some kind of a laser. But there was also evidence of what looked like surgical incisions. And the cows, they had issues, or the issues were like it seemed like their eyes had been burned out or something like that. They were missing their reproductive organs in many cases. Sometimes they would have incisions around their jaws and their tongues were removed. And there was also, one of the key things was that there was a clear lack of blood when the investigators were doing their autopsies of these animals. And they really couldn't figure out what was going on, but people demanded answers, and that's when they decided that they were going to blame cultists or Satanists about it. And, a lot of the farmers, back then, they were like, I don't believe in aliens and stuff like that. But, my rebuttal to that is that, well, the aliens definitely believe in your cows and your horses. So, these instances were not relegated just to Fife, Alabama. This was also happening in different parts of the United States. It was happening in New Mexico. It was happening in Colorado, Montana, and in numerous different places across the Midwest. But it didn't only happen in the United States. It was happening, they have reported cases of it that happened in Argentina, in Brazil. It was France, happened in the UK, and different stuff like that. So, it wasn't just in this one particular spot. But, these kind of things, they really try to put a lid on it as quick as possible. And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to touch on today, is that it was just recently, this was probably back in, 2023, 2024, and they were talking about those New Jersey drones that were flying around up there. And people were getting videos of them, okay, while they were up in the air, flying around or floating in the air or whatever it was. But they looked like airplanes, but they weren't, right? Or Now there is a silver lining type thing about this, because I'm having a hard time making heads or tails of it, because that was right around the time that AI was really starting to get going and people were starting to share AI videos. So, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But there were a lot of people who claimed they saw them with their own eyes. And they were like, that is not an airplane. That is not what airplanes look like. And I've seen some videos of it too, right? But that's beside the point. The thing was that as soon as Donald Trump got into office, That was one of the main topics. That was about a year ago. That was back 2025. And his White House spokeswoman, Carolyn Levitt, she got up there and she said, "Oh yeah, those are just hobbyist drones. Those are just people that are flying around their own little hobby drones." And I'm just like, "Okay, that is not it." Okay, but everybody just said, "Okay, that's fine." And then they went on to the next thing because and I think it's strange how quickly and how easily people accept the most mundane or asinine excuses that people give. Now, going back to the cattle mutilations, okay? Now, back then, when they were looking at these injuries to these cows under, I guess you would say, electron microscopes or like very high powered microscopes, these cows, okay, they saw that some of these incisions and cuts and stuff around the in the cows that the cows had, they said that these cuts were made at a cellular level, that these incisions were made that cut between cells. Now, I'm not sure exactly how all that works, but I mean, if you slash flesh, okay, I guess some of the cuts might be between the cells, I suppose. I don't know. I mean, the cells are splitting, but these were more surgically done from what I have read and what I have heard about, which is one of the things that really caught my attention. And I remember seeing these videos on TV, and this was all the rage. This was what everyone was talking about back then, and it was really something else. But people were talking about seeing these orange lights, these orange orbs in the sky, and some people claimed that they even saw these things hovering over their fields, and then the next morning when they would wake up, they would see that their cows were out there. And sometimes there were multiples. There was like 2 or 3 or 4 that had gone down in the night. And and then the Satanists supposedly came out and they were like, "Look, we didn't do this. You guys need to stop blaming us for this." And I remember hearing that there was a fella that was explaining it, and he's like, "Look, if Satanists are going to commit crimes, they want you to know it was them. Like, they'll do something like a pentagram, or they'll carve some kind of like something in the skin or something like that." But this was very, very articulately done. And there were pieces of the cows that were missing that didn't really make any logical sense, like the surgical thing, the surgical removals and stuff that they did. It would be like a missing joint. I keep on pointing at my shoulder because I'm trying to get the words, but it's like a missing joint or a ball joint or something like that. And it's, I imagine, for some kind of experimentation and stuff like that. But, we can't really understand exactly what these aliens are doing and what they're going for, because in a way, I feel like for us to get an actual understanding of it, it might be beyond our comprehension, really, because sometimes I think about it like this. It's like trying to teach a dog how to build a television. Like, you can train it from the time it's born until the time that it's, of full age and give, 10 years. And that dog is never going to be able to turn a screwdriver. The dog is never going to be able to connect 2 wires together. And dogs are wonderful and they can do a lot of great things, but a dog can't build a television, right? And just like maybe that's humans can't build these things, okay? So, there are a lot of different instances where things like that happen. But while I'm talking, and while I'm thinking about it, I would like to tell you guys about a particular UFO that I saw. This was probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. And it happened during bright daylight. Okay, so the sun had already come up. It was in the AM, but the craft, I was on the interstate and I was driving, and there were vehicles in front of me, there were vehicles behind me. I was in my car and I was heading home after a night shift. And it was normal rush hour traffic, and it's busy out here in South Carolina. I mean, there's lots of vehicles going up and down the road, so I was not alone in seeing this thing. But to my best description, it looked like as if you had a ping pong ball, right? Okay, now this thing was about the size of a helicopter cockpit, was about the size of it. And if you could imagine a ping pong ball, okay, that was split perfectly in half and spread like this, and it had I guess you could say a metallic or some kind of midsection, okay, that went up the middle, and the thing was floating like this. It looked like its normal state of being would be closed, and would look like a ping pong ball or like a soccer ball without the checkerboard on it, right? And it was about eggshell colored, and probably like an off-white. And this thing was like this, and the midsection had a lens on it, and the whole ship was spinning around in a circle, and it was probably about 50 feet above the tree line, and it was near the interstate. But the thing that I noticed was that nobody was really slowing down, nobody was stopping, nobody was really reacting in any kind of way. They were not swerving their vehicles or anything. And I'm just keeping an eye on this thing over here to my right. And there was a guy on an overpass who had his vehicle stopped, and he had his phone out and he was recording this thing. So I do know that there was at least one other person who was paying attention and who noticed it. But the thing was that it was behaving erratically, and it started spinning, or it was spinning, but it started spinning faster. And then the lens that it had in the center shot a beam out of it, and it was like a purplish / pinkish beam, but it was more like a lightsaber. And that lightsaber, I'm just going to say it was a lightsaber, started going and pointing it at all the different cars on the road, and it was just like doing it really fast, like it was scanning. And then it pointed it at me and hit me directly in the eyes. And you could look at it from a side angle and everything was fine, but as soon as it pointed it at me and it hit me in the eyes, it was like looking at a welding arc. Like if you've ever seen people welding before, you know how bright it is. It was like that. And I just went, oof. Like it just like squeezed my eyes shut and looked away. And it made me feel instantly nauseous. Like I immediately felt the urge to vomit or to throw up, but I didn't. But I went, oof, like it just really got me. And anytime that I close my eyes for longer than a blink, like if I close my eyes like this, like I could see all these like weird, like geometric, like fractal type shapes that didn't make any sense. But it was like I got my retinas burned or something like that. And my eyes behind my lids were just really, everything was just weird, and it's just difficult to explain. Almost like a hallucination or something like that. And that feeling that I had in my stomach where I felt like I needed to vomit continued on for several hours after this incident happened. But that thing eventually, like after some amount of time that it shot that laser around, and then it retracted the laser, and then it took off and was out of sight, because by then I was already passing it by on the interstate. And I'll never forget that. But that was the closest that I ever felt to being actually physically attacked by one of these things, right? And with different technologies like that, it is not surprising to me that they could possibly use those lasers, or lasers like that, or some kind of technology like that, to use to create some kind of surgical incisions or some kind of thing like that, because I can tell that that thing that pointed at me was hot. Like, I mean, it didn't burn me, obviously, but I mean, it was brighter than the sun. It was brighter than the sun, probably like 2x brighter than if you like looked up and saw the sun. Like, it's like 2-3 times brighter. I mean, I'm telling you, it was really something else. But, you know, these different kinds of things, they happen, and a lot of people, you know, they shrug it off, that they will accept the most outlandish types of excuses, just as long as the excuse is good enough for them to put it behind themselves, to put the whole story and everything behind themselves and say, yeah, you know, it was some cultists that did this to my cows, you know, because the implications of something else, I mean, you know, some people, they can't sleep at night thinking that this stuff is going on. So, I mean, it's sometimes it's easier to just accept the official narrative than to actually face it head on and talk about it, you know. But there's a lot of people out there, they kept these things to themselves. They stopped even reporting on some of these mutilations that they had on their properties, because they didn't want to be painted as a kook, or as a UFO guy. Oh, he's crazy. You know, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, I heard that Jim and Jane over there, you know, they lost their mind. They think that aliens got their pig. You know what I mean? So people really just wanted to go along to get along. But, you know, these kind of these instances happened for nearly a decade, and they might even still continue, but it's been squashed. But there were people who they recalled seeing like black helicopters and stuff. There was most likely what do they call it? A secret government investigation involving this. But, you know, people said they saw these orange lights and that they were all over the place. There were 50 plus people who reported them, the same encounters, in like one weekend. So it was definitely a hot spot there in Fife, Alabama for a time, but it wasn't just in that one area. And I want to reiterate that, because, you know, it's aliens and stuff like that, or Satanists aren't worldwide like that, and they're not all going to do that. And who has the kind of technology to cut in between cells? You know, and even still, these kind of injuries that these animals had, even if it was humans that did it, they would require more time and more light to create these kinds of injuries that these animals sustained. So always something new to think about, and always, you know, different anomalies to detect, different things to talk about. So I'm going to keep on coming at you guys with more of these videos, and I hope you guys are enjoying them. It takes a lot of work to get myself here and you know, just try to do it all in 1 or 2 takes. You know, I'll get through like 5-6 minutes of the video and I'll completely forget what the hell I was saying, and I'm like, oh no, and then I freaking have to restart the whole thing. You know, so I come at you guys with more of a candid outlook of it, like, just like, this is me, This is what I'm doing right now. It's really just 1 or 2 takes. I don't even really know how to do the editing and stuff. I can cut out little chunks and little clips, but I don't know how to take out the parts of it that I don't like. So it really is what it is. And I hope that I'm entertaining and convincing enough for you guys to give this a real look, because you're not going to get a good disclosure or anything like that listening to Carolyn Levitt on Fox News or something like that, or from the White House, trying to tell you that it's not what it appears. Because a lot of the times, if you're seeing something crazy in the sky, chances are there ain't humans inside that thing, okay? Because just like I said, when I saw that little green orb floating in front of my windshield that one morning, that one dark early morning when I was driving to work, well, there ain't no humans inside that thing. But you know what else isn't inside of it? Little grays. Little 4-foot gray, little gray men with big eyes. They can't fit in that thing either. You know what I mean? So how small are some of them, right? Like, how small you got to be to fit inside of a bottle cap? Is it like a bunch of little germs in there? Who knows? But these are the kind of questions that I'm trying to answer, or trying to, come up with some interesting theories about, because, I have a lot of experience with these things, and I've seen a lot of different stuff. So I'm just trying to relay the message to y'all. So I hope you guys will tune in again, and I will see you next time in the next video. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.